Emperor Nero unleashed poisonous snakes into the audience at the gladiator games, and watched with amusement as the crowds panicked and fell victim to poisonous bites. A father and son entered the arena together, not as fighters, but as prey. They were chained up, forced to fight poisonous snakes and wild animals as the audience cheered them on. Then they were set ablaze, turning the night sky of Rome into a funeral pyre. And when the flames subsided, there was nothing left but ashes and the stench of burning flesh. This is the real history of Rome, the good, the bad, and the bloody. And it's all coming up next. This is Rome Unfiltered. Caesar's rise and fall. Julius Caesar wasn't the first Roman to seize dictatorial powers, but he may have been the most effective. He took control of the Republic in 49 BC, and by 44 BC had defeated his rivals, Marius and Pompey, and was master of Rome. But the Senate feared Caesar's growing power. In 44 BC, a group of senators led by Cassius and Brutus assassinated Caesar. But instead of restoring the Republic, the murder only plunged Rome deeper into chaos. The Colossus Dark Reality, built between 70 and 80 AD, the Colossus was the largest amphitheater in the ancient world. It could hold over 50,000 spectators who would gather to watch gladiators battle to the death. Prisoners of war be put on display and sold to the highest bidder, or animals hunted for sport. Historians estimate that some 1 million people lost their lives in the Colosseum, including Christians persecuted by the Roman emperors. Nero's madness. Nero became emperor of Rome at age 17 after the death of his mother, Agrippina the Younger. For the first 5 years of his reign, he ruled alongside his stepfather, the infamous Seneca. However, in 62 AD, Nero turned against Seneca and began his reign of terror. 6 years later, in 68 AD, Nero infamously ordered the Great Fire of Rome, which burned for 6 days and destroyed 1/4 of the city. He used the fire as a cover to further expand his palace complex, which became known as the Domus Aurea, or Golden House. In art, Nero appears as a tyrant, a madman who delights in inflicting pain and suffering on others. But he was also an accomplished musician and poet. Plebeians versus patricians. The vast majority of Romans were poor, uneducated peasants or urban laborers called plebeians. They lived in filth and poverty in the city's slums. The patricians were the elite class who held most of the wealth and power in Roman society. In theory, the gap between the two classes wasn't as wide as it seems today. Any male Roman citizen could rise to great heights if he was ambitious and talented enough. However, in practice, this wasn't always true. The Roman legions, when it came to warfare, the Romans were masters of their craft. At its peak, The Roman army consisted of 28 legions, each comprising 5,000 soldiers. Legionnaires were expected to be disciplined and obedient. Loot or plunder was forbidden, and disobedience meant leaving the ranks without orders. Prisoners of war were often killed, as were those who surrendered. Slaves were preferred as soldiers because there was no risk of them deserting or rebelling against their masters. Under the Republic, Rome conquered most of the Mediterranean, absorbing diverse peoples into its ever-growing empire. By the end of the Republic, the Roman legions had grown to over 500,000 men. Corruption and power struggles. Roman senators, emperors, and generals were renowned for their greed and lust for power. They engaged in conspiracies, rebellions, and assassinations to achieve their goals. For example, Gaius Marius was a Roman general who played a significant role in the late Republic, rising from the rank of military tribune to consul, then dictator. His rival, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, launched a civil war against him, seizing Rome and proscribing thousands of his opponents, including Marius. After his death, Julius Caesar emerged as the dominant force in Roman politics, but was eventually assassinated by a group of senators, fearing his growing power. Slavery at Rome's core. Estimates suggest that 30 to 40% of the population of ancient Rome were slaves. Many were captives of war or criminals sentenced to a life of servitude. Others were freeborn Romans who had been sold into slavery by their families to pay off debts. In wealthy households, slaves might be able to earn their freedom after years of service. However, in most cases, they remained enslaved until death. The living conditions for slaves in Rome were terrible. They were forced to work long hours for little or no pay and were often beaten or tortured by their masters. Despite their brutal treatment, slaves were essential to the Roman way of life. They performed all the dirty work, such as cleaning the streets and sewers, and many were highly skilled craftsmen or servants. The geese that saved Rome. According to legend, a flock of sacred geese saved Rome from an invading army in 390 BC. The story goes that a group of Gauls attacked the city, but were driven away by a flock of geese that flew down from the nearby Janiculum Hill. The geese were kept in a temple on the Aventini Hill and were fed by the Vestal Virgins, a group of young women who were priestesses of the goddess Vesta. The geese were said to be so intelligent that they recognized their own reflections in the Tiber River and believed they were swimming in the sky. When the Gauls invaded, the geese panicked and flew towards the Capitol Hill, where the Romans were sheltering. Their honking alerted the Romans to the danger, and they were able to repel the attack. While there's no historical evidence to support this story, it's still popular in Rome today. Decline of the Republic. Rome's transition from republic to empire was a gradual process that occurred over several centuries. The republic had its share of problems, such as political corruption, social inequality, and foreign threats. However, it was ultimately the ambition, greed, and violence of Rome as leaders that tore down the republic and paved the way for the empire. For example, Julius Caesar's seizure of dictatorial powers and subsequent assassination created a power vacuum that led to civil war. The republic's collapse was also aided by the emergence of powerful military leaders, such as Marcus Licinius Crassus and Pompey the Great. These men were able to raise armies and wage war without the approval of the Senate, which was supposed to be the highest authority in the Republic. The empire's legacy. Despite its brutality, the Roman Empire left a lasting legacy on the world. Roman law and principles of jurisprudence are still studied today. Its magnificent architecture continues to inspire awe, and its language, Latin, is the root of many modern languages. The Romans also built the world's first paved roads, which allowed for the quick and easy movement of goods and people throughout the empire. And yet behind all these achievements lies a dark reality of slavery, oppression, and violence. What do you find most shocking about ancient Rome? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.